Welcome to the revision series, cluster 2, topic 1 on tourism. So this is the pre-prelim revision series where we cover through the syllabus itself, a little bit of rerun through what you would encounter or you would have encountered in the content. So hopefully this gives us some context in terms of when we're prepping for this particular topic itself, what to look out for, what kind of questions we'll be looking at. Another very key important part of this prelim revision series is once again we're looking at what are some of the possible question types so that you are better prepared and not caught off guard. So once again, we'll be looking at the link between the content requirements to your notes. Okay, we'll be looking at possible question areas and then a very brief review of the key content areas that you would need to answer these type of questions. Right, so under topic 1 of cluster 2, tourism, first KQ is on tourist systems. So you would generally see recall questions here, stimulus-led questions. In terms of content, I think the first few parts are pretty straightforward. What is a tourist? What do you need to accomplish to qualify as a tourist? Are there certain reasons for tourism to exist? Right. Then we also went on and we looked at what are some of the push factors for generating regions and what are the pull factors at the tourist destination regions. Okay. And following that, we looked at the tourist system itself. What are the businesses involved in the tourism system? What are the organizations that both deal with tourists coming into your country and tourists leaving from your country? Okay, both the generating and the destination regions. What are the businesses and what are the organizations that exist as a result of the rise of tourism as an industry? Following that, the third part here talks about interactions between tourism and the environment, the negative impacts especially that comes out more. However, always remember there are positives, okay, or there are businesses that are not all negative in this area here. So we actually looked at, I will drop some company names, hopefully you can remember some of them. We looked at a case study where one of the fishermen became a conservationist. So he mentioned things like the fish is worth more as a tourist item than on a plate. Then there was also another area where we look at quicksilver tours in the Great Barrier Reef, where they conduct guided tours and they have marine biologists out at sea with the crew. And in totality, there is a much bigger emphasis on conservation and giving back to the nature area itself. So this idea of are they all negative? Are all businesses in tourism negative? Okay, this is important that you have an understanding of. Not all of them are negative, but they are all, to some extent, right? They are all exploitative because they all need to exploit what is available in nature for their businesses to grow. Okay, so that is important. And we have to remember that. Okay, so once again, bear in mind this is a human job topic. So whenever you're looking at human job topic and in terms of impacts of businesses or communities or even NGOs, when there is a process that has been administered, somebody must earn money out of this. Okay, so this is very important. So one of the very key pictures that's in your notes is this one that talks about routes, okay, transit routes from tourist destination to generating region to destination region. And then we talked about what about places that are transit points, okay, what does it open up in terms of tourism? Does it benefit the country that is the transit point? Does it bring more people to your country? Are there specific countries that function in this way? Okay, a transit point, a tourism transit hub, right? So we mentioned things, locations like Dubai, which is a transit point in the Middle East for people going onwards into Europe itself, or from Asia, or people going around the world. Dubai became a transit hub. Singapore is another one of these transit hubs. Okay. The other thing is we also talked about with transit routes, what does it open up in terms of flights and in terms of savings, right? So we did talk about sometimes if you're willing to take a transit flight with a stopover or without a stopover, just a transit at a third location, your plane ticket may be a lot cheaper. So for the location where you're doing the transit, you open up the location to more tourists. For the people who are not interested in that location, you could also end up inevitably being there because of the savings that you want to seek out. So impact of this on the local community is also something that we could look at. Moving on to the second KQ, what led to the growth of tourism? Now this is a very neatly packaged three general factors, three categories of factors: motivation factors, ability factors, and mobility factors. So once you see within the syllabus itself is such a neatly packed out factor that addresses the KQ, then you should immediately recognize that this is possibly an OEQ area. Okay, so what kind of questions can you see? Or could they set? They could set 1 versus 2 versus 3, or 1 versus 2, 2 versus 3, 1 versus 3, whichever combination it is. That is across the factors itself. So mobility versus ability, then you will have to pick what are the mobility factors you want to talk about versus what are the ability factors that you want to talk about. Okay, it can be 2 to 1, can be 1 to 2, it really depends, right? However, it can also be motivation versus ability versus mobility, right? So they tell you motivation to travel is the most important in comparison to ability and mobility in the growth of tourism. Then you need to pick one from each category respectively. Okay. The third possibility, of course, is if they tell you expansion of public transport services and infrastructure is the more important mobility factor that leads to growth of tourism. Then you have to talk about 3A, expansion of public transport services and infrastructure, and you versus increased private car ownership, improving travel convenience. So private car ownership versus public transport infrastructure improvement, which one actually brings about more tourism? Okay, so this one is the third possibility. We have actually seen this happen in the previous syllabus, but not in this current syllabus. Also because this syllabus is so new, but bear this in mind, we have not seen this yet. It is not impossible to do. Actually, it's quite easy to do if you get this question. If you get the mobility in travel within mobility, right, A versus B, okay, always bear in mind that public transport systems and infrastructure, this actually deals with mass tourism. Mass tourism meaning what? Meaning we are dealing with large numbers. Okay, versus car ownership, this is actually a more niche form of tourism, right? Smaller numbers. The total amount of people who will buy a car and go on a road trip is going to be a lot lesser than people who will take a cheaper transport services and go and fly away to Malacca, right? So keep that in mind. This is actually not a very difficult one to do, okay? Because you have a comparison, criteria for comparison, which is the scale of the impact in terms of numbers of people, in terms of the amount of money that it will probably generate. Second thing I want to talk about in this under this second KQ here is this concept of balance evaluation. Okay, I've been getting actually for the past 2 years, we have on and off gotten attempts in OEQ where you write down neither agree nor disagree, or to a certain extent both are equally important. Now this is one of the very rare places where you have actually two factors that are actually equal in importance, right? Equal in importance, both are equally important. Okay, but this is one of the very few places where you can see this. So most of the time, if you come up with a equally important evaluation, your evaluation is going to be a L3 7 max, because the evaluation itself is going to be weak. It's a cop-out evaluation. However, in this case here, if you are asked to deal with ability factors and you talk about disposable income, okay, disposable income, you talk about leisure time, and you talk about business lower transport and accommodation costs, right? These two, 1 and 2, are equally important. So you are allowed to have a balanced argument in this case. They are equally important. They are both more important than the third one, lowering of costs. However, they're both equally important. Okay, or if you are tasked to deal with disposable income versus leisure time, then 2 paragraphs only, but both equally important. Without either one, you will not have no tourism. Okay, tourism will not exist unless either you have disposable income and leisure time. Okay, if you are missing either one of them alone, you are also not going to go on tour. So let's think in for a minute. Think about this. This is one of the very rare occasions where it's actually really okay it will unlock all three tier points of your L3 answer. Okay, so I clip out the leisure time component here to give you an idea of what this is. Okay, so when you're talking about leisure time, right, as a factor, the concept that is time away from work, there's a description of what leisure time is. So this first point, first dot here, this is my point. Okay, come in the form of paid leave, common among middle class employees. This is the explanation. All right, so this will be my link, and you will need to give me an example in whichever country X, right? Mandatory leave or 14 days. Okay, so let's not talk about country X, let's talk about Singapore. Right, in Singapore, it's mandatory to give your permanent staff 14 days of leave once they are confirmed. Right, so with that, they are able to then move on and go on tour. Right, so example, right, so I want to bring in the point again. You cannot just tell me leisure time, put the leisure time 2 words down and think that that's the point. You need to describe what leisure time looks like. Okay, what exactly is it? It's time that's away from work. Okay, because work is all consuming, right? So leisure time gives you time away from work to go and do whatever you want. And in this case, we're looking at going to do tourism. Okay, moving on to KQ3. KQ3, what we're looking at, how do tourist destination regions develop over time? So this one is that development graph, okay? The development graph that has 7 steps, right? That all countries who are involved in tourism will go through the first 5 steps, okay? So from exploration, involvement step, development, consolidation, and then stagnation. Stagnation is step 5, and then whether you go to decline or rejuvenation depends on what you do. So this one largely going to be recall or stimulus led. If you're very lucky, they give you the graph itself, which I don't think is of a big help. But key thing in this graph here is the point where you have the 2 dotted lines, because there's a pivotal point in the development of tourism in your country. After stage 5, where you all will go through stagnation, okay, is a part that you cannot skip. So you must be able to explain what stagnation is. Moving on, you must be able to tell me what must you do to avoid decline. Okay, so if I'm preparing for this, I will not memorize 5, 6, and 7. I will memorize 5, or I will try to commit to memory what 5 looks like, and I need to tell myself at 5 what must I do to avoid going to 6. Because 6 is decline. As long as you remain status quo, you're in stagnation already. People will no longer come to you. You'll have less money. As a result of less money, less people visiting, you will have less amount spent on maintenance, because you will always take a profit first. You will always pay yourself first. Right? So maintenance doesn't come in. You have more things that will break down. Further decline of visitors. And then it's a downward spiral already. Then you have initiated decline. So how do you not hit that? Once you stagnate, what must be done? Okay, moving money away from profits into maintenance is a must. If you're willing to do that, you will either continue to stay in stagnation, or you will start to move towards rejuvenation. Because once your things don't break down, you will suffer a slower loss of tourist arrivals. Of course, it doesn't mean that you escape, because at this point, if nothing is done to attract new tourists, the amount of tourists you have will decline again. Right? So what must be done? Okay, you want to move to 6, what must you choose not to do? You want to move to 7, where you have rejuvenation, what must you do to rejuvenate so that it goes through the cycle again? Okay, so this one once again, generally we call stimulus led, but I would like to remind you, we actually did a question, an OEQ on this in one of your practice assignments. Okay, so it's not impossible that this comes out as an OEQ. Keep this in mind, it's not impossible. For KQ4, right, personality characteristics affect tourist destination regions. This has got to do with the 2 main personality types, your venturer and your dependables. So you need to be able to clearly identify what are things that each of these groups prefer in their tourism. Okay, what are the things that guide them? okay, to spend money in this area, what do they look out for, and therefore match the tourism site to the kind of tourists that it attracts. Okay, so generally it should be recall stimulus led. I don't see how this can be OEQ, respectably set OEQ, okay, except for all tourists are dependables. Do you agree? Right? It's not impossible, but I don't think it's a very respectful thing to set like this. Um, Rather remind you the Mongolia video that we ended topic one on, okay, and what kind of tourist, dependable or venturer would go for such a trip in Mongolia. So of course they cannot give you a video during your exam, but they can give you photo stimulus, they can give you imagery, they can give you advertisements, and then based on what data is given to you, they require you to identify and explain how you come to this point, that what kind of tourists are they trying to attract. Okay, dependable adventurer, you must remember the terms as well. They may not give you the terms, but they will expect the terms back. Okay, so I clip out the two types of Tokyo trip slide here, right? The dependable one, right? Go to the Michelin star restaurant, take the ropeway up, take the ropeway, which is basically the cable car up half mountain, then you climb up 30 minutes, right? Looking for conveniently authentic experiences. The venture type will, look for the neighborhood ramen shop, okay, in obscure part of Tokyo, right? Hike up the full hike up the mountain, 599 meters, taking them 2 hours. They're looking for the authentic experience versus the conveniently authentic experience. Okay, so authentic within limits, right? I want to experience it versus I need to tell people I've been there. Okay, they are seeking very different things. Now, I just want to, at this point, bring up one key thing that was discussed very recently with the secretaries. Which will be more expensive? Okay, this idea of what is more expensive here. Will the dependable one actually always be cheaper? It is mass market, right? It's mass market. But is it going to be cheaper than going and getting a very, very authentic experience? Okay, one that nobody has gone, so you're the first timer, you're the first dibs, yeah. So would it be more expensive? So keep in mind that it can swing both ways. Okay, price is not a good way to determine this. Second thing is, if you're looking for a very authentic experience, right, it could be very, very expensive, whereas you could need a private guide, 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, versus your mass dependable tour will be maybe 1-to-15 or 1-to-20 people in the tour group itself. So the cost itself could be very much higher to embark on the venturer type tourism experience. However, does it mean that only the very rich can get to do such experiences? Okay, I can tell you very clearly now the answer is no. It is not only the very rich that can do this. It just means that you need to commit more money to this. If you're not very rich, right, it will mean that this is something that you save up for. Maybe you go for a tour every 5 years, right? Versus the dependable one, if you had chosen to go to the dependable one, you would have gone every other year. But this one, venturer type, more unique, more authentic, more unknown, things not ready, you need to pay more for everything. So the amount of costs upfront is such that you can only go once every 5 years. Okay, does it mean that you have to be very rich? No, it just means that you have to save longer if you're not very rich. Okay, so keep that in mind. So at the end of cluster 3, right, cluster 3 topic 1 is where you can already find there are several things that can come out as OEQ. Okay, in our main cluster topics, this is the problem that you experience. Firstly, mobility factors. Mobility factors are more critical than ability factors in the growth of global tourism. Do you agree? How far do you agree, right? What are we looking at? If we're looking at mobility factors, we're looking at improvements in transportation as well as increased car ownership. How do these two things help increase your mobility? And is that increase in mobility leading to a greater growth in tourism versus ability factors? So once again, ability factors, disposable income, leisure time. Once you see these two, I'm going to include these two because these two are easy to argue for. These two are most important. Lower cost, depending on what you want to do. Of course, if you cannot remember, you can only remember lower cost, then you pick what you can remember. Okay, so this one, I would probably deal with disposable income and leisure time versus maybe increase in car ownership. Much easier to talk against. Second OEQ, take a look. Disposable income is the most important ability factor in the growth of tourism. Ability factors, what can we talk about? If you look above again, ability factors, you have three: disposable income, leisure time, and lower costs. So in this case here, you have to juggle against leisure time and lower costs. Okay, because comparison word is most, so I need three. This one I just need two actually. Okay, but remember, if you have two, then you have to talk about limitations of the factor itself. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough content to qualify for L3. Finally, this is the very similar. I think this is the tricky one that we saw. All destinations will eventually reach decline stage in the stage of tourism development. Agree, disagree. Once again, just a reminder, we did this already, so I don't want you to do this again. What are we dealing with? Stage 5, you need to describe what stage 5 is in first paragraph. Stage 6 and then stage 7, evaluation will be yes or no. Why? What's the difference at stage 5 that will bring you to either stage 6 or stage 7? What must you do or what must you choose not to do? Okay, and the end result is moving to stage 6 and stage 7. Evaluation paragraph, very simple. Disagree? Because if certain actions are taken, list the actions that you can take, it need not go to decline stage. There's a chance that it can go to stage 6, which is rejuvenation. So we've come to the end of cluster 3 topic 1. Now, as a practice, the second OEQ here, question 2, is something that we have actually not done before. So I would like you to practice this complete OEQ. Okay? Do you agree? Explain. 9 marks, 1 OEQ. Okay, with that we come to the end of cluster 3 topic 1. Right? We will continue with cluster 3 topic. Sorry, this is cluster 2. Cluster 2. Right? We'll continue with cluster 2 topic 2 in the next video.